Welcome to episode 32 of the Total Hockey Training Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Scahan. As always, I just want to give a little plug to Total Hockey Training. That's my online platform. We are in our preseason phase, about to roll into our in-season phase. So if you're an athlete or hockey player anywhere around the world, you can access that program, and I could be your virtual coach. My next guest is Jeff Cubos, and I love this bio here. I printed it off. The official line: he is a sports specialist chiropractor through the Royal College of Chiropractic Sports Sciences in Canada, and a strength and conditioning specialist through the NSCA. He holds two full-time positions: private practice in Spruce Grove, Alberta, and professional hockey in Edmonton, Alberta. I think we know what team that is. The bottom line: he is a relentless, curious person. He believes that in order to be successful in work and in life, you have to be adaptable and you must know how to communicate. You must also be willing to think both upstream and downstream. He also believes that making seemingly random connections across disciplines is reserved for the open-minded. Jeff, that's an awesome bio. Welcome to the show, pal.
Thank you. It's great to chat and catch up.
Yeah. Tell us about yourself, where you're from, and what got you down this path of curiosity here.
Sure. Okay, let's start with I'm originally from Toronto, um, uh, born and raised, and in the late '90s, ended up going to the University of Toronto, did my bachelor's of physical education and health, and moved on to chiropractic college. And so we're gonna go on a little, hopefully not too long of a journey here. But
Yeah.
in my first year of chiropractic school, um, the the mentor that I had in undergraduate studies, he was a chiropractor. He was a chiropractor for the Toronto Raptors. And so my first year of chiropractic school, he hooked me up with a position of a minor hockey, AAA minor hockey team, and um, followed that through for the next 3 years while I was in school, um, doing the student trainer thing plus running their strength and conditioning, and then followed that up with another 3 years with another minor hockey team and helped out with the junior A team, and then graduated from school, um, and did my sports specialist fellowship program, my residency program, where we followed surgeons and radiologists, and did my master's studies as well. So by the time I pretty much got out of schooling per se, I was maybe 7, 8 years deep in hockey experience before I even became a quote unquote professional, um, professional in the industry, which was a great experience.
Yeah.
Uh, and then in 2009, my wife and I moved out west to Spruce Grove, Alberta, which is just outside of Edmonton. Worked more hockey there in the junior A level. Uh, and then fast forward to the COVID bubble where I joined with the Oilers. So about myself specifically, it's one of those things where I just always tried to get as much hands-on experience as possible, um, whether it be with lacrosse, track and field, gymnastics, hockey, obviously, and through that, I would say diverse experience, I was able to, see where connections across disciplines were,
Mhm.
and that kept me open-minded and curious, I guess you can say.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, who was the gentleman who was your mentor at the University of Toronto?
He was Dr. Joe Polino. He had a
Oh,
private
yeah.
practice. Yeah, private practice. His brother is Mike Polino, who worked in the league.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure he coaches overseas now and maybe for the Italian national team. Joe Polino is still practicing, and I still connect with him. as
Yeah.
much as I can these days. It's, he opened the door for me. So yeah,
Yeah. I connected with Mike back in the early 2000s as I remember he created well, he didn't create a stability ball, but he had a stability ball with the core exercises on the ball. And
that's correct. I still have one.
it's a brown ball with like
Yeah,
the exercises
yeah,
are wrapped around the ball. And
yeah,
he is an active release technician,
yes,
active release technique provider, right?
yeah, yeah.
And
He's an instructor. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and he
uh,
was instrumental in introducing me to ART.
yeah.
And right down the street from the Honda Center, a guy named Ron Higuera was a
Okay, yeah, yeah.
unbelievable ART provider, and we would shuttle guys to his office on a daily basis there for years. So
Sure.
that was pretty cool because if I didn't meet Mike through Mike Babcock, actually, you know, we maybe would have never learned about ART. And I was learning about it through like Poliquin stuff and all that.
Sure,
My
sure.
curiosity was leading me down that path. But that's pretty neat. That's pretty cool. And I remember a couple of years ago, he he showed me a like an isokinetic machine in Toronto that he was that was ahead of its time. I wonder if he's still working with that machine and getting into clinics. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. I don't know if it's the same one, but the machine that he had when I was there, which was interesting, it was called Strive.
Yes.
So it
Yes.
was called, yeah, so it's called Strive, and the way it worked was you can manipulate the settings that would focus on, if you take the uh force velocity curve or the strength and power curve. I can't remember which one, I apologize. But let's simplify it. If you're taking a bicep curl, you can maximize the load at the beginning or at the middle or at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So so in a modern day perspective, for those that are familiar with the functional range conditioning principles, it's not dissimilar from doing pails or rails, where
Mm-hmm.
you're at the, loading up at the opening angle or loading up at the closing angle. And interestingly enough, I was hanging out with Dr. Michael Prebeg in Toronto last year for a week,
Mm-hmm.
and we were at Matty Nichols' place, and Matty has some of those machines.
Oh, really?
So yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
cool.
So it's like 20 years later, these things are
Yeah.
still kicking around, but no one knows about them.
Yeah, that's funny. Mike Prebag,
Yeah,
another guy that I know,
yeah.
he used to come down and treat Ray Emery years ago. And
Oh yeah,
great guy, just a great person, willing to share information, which is great.
yeah,
So
100%.
so talk about what inspired you, what got you motivated to get into chiropractic work and strength and conditioning work.
Um,
Were you
there
an
wasn't
athlete?
one pit. Yeah, not a good one. Not a good one. I did play decent level baseball. I played uh house league and rep hockey, but I not a tall individual, I guess average size. And the reality is, my parents were immigrants, so not much money floating around either. So I was able to play house league hockey and rep hockey, but there wasn't really a pivotal moment with me actually getting to the point of doing what I did, other than the fact that, you know, when I was in undergraduate education doing physical education and health, um, I knew I always wanted to do some type of therapy. So I had applied into athletic training, athletic therapy. I had applied into physiotherapy, and I had applied into chiropractic school. But in my final year, I had my placement with Dr. Polino, and I was at his, the requirement for the placement was once a week for the entire year. I ended up going maybe 3 times a week, after or before my classes at school, just because I really enjoyed it. He had Raptors coming in, he had Maple Leafs coming in, he had alumni coming in, some NF, former NFLers coming in, and I was wide-eyed.
Mm-hmm.
At that age, maybe 20 years old, you're wide-eyed and you're seeing what he's doing. He took me to a couple Raptors games. So I thought, you know what, I'll just go that route
Mm-hmm.
and work my way from there. So got into chiropractic school. As I said earlier, I started working with hockey players. While I was in undergraduate, actually, I started personal training and did my NSCA. So I was just doing a whole bunch of little things that I enjoyed at the time that, you know, as the years went by, they they formed into I guess, a style of work that I really enjoyed, which was training and treating and in rehab, which is no different than what I'm doing today.
I love that. That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is kind of, you're still doing it and you're loving it and enjoying it, and that's really cool. So talk about, moving out to Edmonton, or Spruce Grove, I should say, and starting your own
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah, sure. So, I had already graduated from chiropractic school in 2006, but went back and did more schooling to become a sports specialist, including my master's degree. And my wife, who I had met in chiropractic school, we graduated as soon as we got married as soon as we graduated. We were, while I was still doing that extra schooling, we were doing extra work in Toronto. But towards the end of my schooling, she wanted to move back home to just outside of Edmonton in Spruce Grove. So, there was nothing tying me down, and I said, "Yeah, let's give it a shot." Coincidentally, um, her clinic that she worked in as a student went up for sale. She had a good relationship with them. It was a busy practice, and so we said, "What the heck? Let's buy, let's go for it." Talked to some banks, and they helped us out, and so it was one of those things where we we were highly leveraged. We had nothing to our name, but we did buy a practice. Good thing did have an existing patient base. I cold called everyone, all the sports teams, and thankfully, got in with the junior A team, who was ranked top 10 for the next 10 years while I was working with them in the
What team was
country.
that? Is that the Oil
That was
Kings?
Spruce. No, that was Spruce Grove Saints.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
so the Oil Kings were in the Dub.
Yep.
We were in the junior Alberta Junior A loop. Um, and yeah, it's just, I guess when you knock on every door, people will start opening doors. And fortunately, they were successful doors that opened up for me. Uh,
It's great.
so yeah, so like I said, we had nothing to our name, and other than resources such as textbooks and books and journal articles. So I didn't have any money left to buy fancy toys. So, fancy equipment, fancy medical equipment, fancy gym equipment, or anything like that. So you're forced to think outside of the box. You're forced to think of ways to help people out. Again, whether it be training them or treating them in a manner that's bare bones.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back, I think that's the best thing that could have ever happened to us, was to be able to utilize the resources that were minimal but still be effective. And so, just to go off on a little bit of a tangent now, that's helped me out greatly because, in the clinic, when I'm treating the quote unquote everyday person, not in the professional hockey world, but in the clinic, it's so, and I guess you can relate to this with, some of your minor athletes and their families. It doesn't have to be fancy,
Mm-hmm.
um, because at the end of the day, if I'm giving them exercises, I can't give them exercises on fancy machines, because what are they going to do when they're not with me? They're going to need, bare bones things at home. Most of them don't have the equipment that a lot of the clinics would have. So I would
Mhm.
have to give them strategies that are based on, whether it be floor based or implement based, that they would have readily available at home, so they can continue and get better.
Couple questions. One, is your wife also a chiro?
She is, and she's the boss.
Oh, okay.
So,
I was
yes,
gonna
yeah,
go down there. Yep, absolutely.
yeah, yeah. She's a chiro, and she because I'm away a lot. Naturally, it evolved to her running the show at the clinic.
Got it. And you mentioned that I think a lot of times there's this perception that anyone who owns a clinic or a gym, whatever, like they might not prescribe home-based exercises because they want you to come back to their facility over and over again. So I respect that because obviously you want them to come back, but you're also giving them day-to-day prescriptions to help them get better, correct?
Yeah, and maybe I'm overboard on on that side of things. That you know it's not wise business wise, I guess you can say. But
Hmm.
I always tell the patients, I say, hey, listen, let's get to the point where you don't need me. Obviously, I'll be around, I'll be here. But let's get you to the point where you don't need me so that you could do the things that you love and have to do. Um, so yeah, so that I will be quite exercise based. Of course, I use my hands, but I will be significantly exercise based, so they can do. And at the end of the day, um, that's how trust gets built, and that's how your network gets built. I intentionally have never really spent a lot of time in. I spend a lot of time in social media for my own knowledge, but not to promote the business because at the end of the day, we are still in a community where word of mouth travels, good or bad. And I think if you can keep it on the positive side, that will get you more quote unquote business than likes and shares.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll talk about it in a little bit here, but working for the oil, I'm sure helps with marketing and getting
Sure.
word of mouth out
Yeah,
there, right?
it does. And maybe we'll talk about it later, but that's a little bit of a uh my wife and I have hit a crossroads with that in the sense, or we butt heads about it at least,
I
because
bet.
uh, I'm pretty overboard in the sense that I never say that I work with the Oilers. Um, I partly intentional just because I never want to attach my identity to that
Hmm.
for the sake of, if the community relates myself with the Oilers and I no longer work for the Oilers, then who am I to them?
Right.
Versus
Right.
if my identity to the public is I'm someone who can help them, then that will always be there.
I love that. That's great. So you're a
Yeah.
pretty humble guy, obviously. That's great.
So yeah, maybe unintentionally, I just that's just the way I like doing things. So naturally they see me on TV.
Hmm.
Naturally they call in and I'm not there, and they're wondering where I am, and so we're not going to lie to them.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm not going to advertise it.
Right. Right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And so just for the listener's perspective, you think Cairo, you think adjustments, you think cracking, in which I was never a fan of getting my neck cracked. I just didn't like
Sure.
that motion. But tell the listeners, okay, you do other things beyond that. Talk about that. Talk about your soft tissue applications and what else you do.
Sure. So I think, and Sean, you would know this. I think at the quote unquote highest level, you might have a chiropractor, a physical therapist, an athletic trainer, even massage therapist, some rehab guys, and you couldn't tell the difference between you wouldn't know
Hmm.
who's who. So um, So what I'm trying to get at is the people at that level, and I wish there were more at the community level, where it didn't matter if they can do soft tissue. It didn't matter if they can adjust, so long as they have the license for what they're doing, so
Mhm.
long as they have the right to do so. Um, what matters most is what the individual needs. So in my repertoire or in my arsenal, I guess you can say, there are various soft tissue techniques. It initially started with active release and evolved to include, functional range release and all these naming techniques, different rehab um, resources from whether it be Prague or Poland or um, anywhere in the US, acupuncture even, um, adjustments, of course. Uh, At the end of the day, it's you have an individual in front of you. They're a professional athlete, an amateur athlete, the kid's parents, it doesn't matter. Um, you do a thorough assessment and you identify what do they need and what recipe do they need. So I guess you're like a customer going into a restaurant and the chef's right in front of you and you tell them that you're hungry and you start chatting and they figure out, okay, what is best for this individual at this moment, and then the
Yeah,
chef, uh whips out a recipe that's catered to the individual. So I guess to answer your question, um every individual would be different, and even across the same individual over time, their management might be different. Of course, if someone is post-surgical, they they might have more passive care, but we're still doing active interventions for the rest of the body,
mhm,
both from a musculoskeletal standpoint as well as from a neurohormonal standpoint that Charlie would talk about, to help promote recovery. As they get more mobile, then of course we're going to be doing more active stuff to get them prepared and ready to get back to what they're doing.
I love that. That's awesome. So, I wanna get into how'd you hook up with the Oilers?
Um, so back in the middle of last decade, as I was doing my thing, working in my clinic, working with track and field and gymnastics, working with the junior A team, one of my friends from Toronto, who's still a good friend now and works with a lot of the hockey players independently in Toronto. His name is Ian McIntyre, Dr. Ian McIntyre. He's a quiet guy. He flies under the radar, but
Mhm,
I would say most pros know him. He just, I guess he's kind of like myself. He cares very little for the self promotion, so to
right.
speak. And that's, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's
Oh,
just
absolutely.
that's just the way we do things. So anyway, he sent me a message and he said, "Hey, are you available? I have a guy who which who's going to be playing against the Oilers at the time, and can you work with him um, at the hotel?" So I said, "Yeah, absolutely, sure." In the meantime, through through journal clubs and book clubs, I had known the Oilers staff. So I had known the Oilers staff all along. Sorry, those are my dogs who just got back from their walk. Um, So I had known the staff, had a good relationship with them. They did their thing, I did my thing. And then so yeah, maybe it's 2014, 2015, where I worked with this player um at his hotel room the night before his game against the Oilers. And then from then on, um, my friend just every now and then would send me a message, "Hey, can you work with this guy?" and so on and so forth. And as you know, like, players in the room talk. So once they
Mhm,
come back the next year playing against us, um, other guys would
yeah,
want work as well. Evolved maybe a couple years later to working with some of the local guys, the Oilers. And then if need be. obviously with the player's permission, I would relay that information to their staff. And so that built up the relationship with the staff. They knew who I was, they knew what I was doing. Wouldn't go behind anyone's backs or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I will say player quote unquote confidentiality comes first, but nothing ever got to a point where there was a there was a need for anything negative or anything like that. Like it was open communication, and so on and so forth. So yeah, by maybe 2 3 years before COVID hit, um, I was full on working with a decent amount of guys across the league and locally. Um, on a semi-regular basis, whether it be going to their houses or going to the hotels
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. And then the bubble hit, and I vividly remember that we were trying to figure out, okay, what do we do, because no one can go into the bubble, no one can, the players can't come out.
Right.
So
I remember that.
so
Yep.
yeah, so chatted with the Oilers guys, and they said, well, just join us.
In the bubble.
Just join us in the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it was only 2 weeks long for us because we got bounced
Same.
in the in the pre-tournament. Yeah, we chatted there. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, and so after that experience, it was agreed that let's just keep going. And so
Awesome.
here we are.
That's great. So yeah,
Yeah,
I can vouch for like a couple things I want to note on that. What you said, it, if you come and treat another player at the hotel, probably a good chance that guy's going in the locker room the next day and saying, I feel effing great. This guy Jeff came and worked on me like he was unbelievable. And that travels fast. There's a lot of players would meet other people like yourself at the hotel. And so that's great.
yeah,
That's how the word of mouth spreads really quickly, right?
sure.
And another thing I want to note is that sometimes I've always been a big believer in whatever helps our players works. Whatever helps our players feel better is the most important thing. And sometimes team staff can get a little bit territorial. Well, what's he doing? What's this guy work? What's he doing that he should be under our care, under our direction? And the good people, and it sounds like TD is probably in that category. The good people embrace other professionals because it doesn't matter. Like it's the player is going to do what they want to do to help them play better. And I think when you can just embrace other professionals that are helping each other out, I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I I guess you can say the same thing, because you're on a certain side of the game now. You've been on the inside.
Hmm.
Now you're working privately.
Yes.
I've been fortunate enough to have been on both sides, and still am currently on both sides because I still have private practice, and I'm
Hmm.
working with the team. Um, Going back to what you just said, that sometimes teams can get territorial. I think in a way there's some merit to that, because I will say that I have learned over time that if I am helping a player privately and they're going to play the next game, I need to understand context, and
Hmm.
I won't fully be able to have access to that context of what they did the day before, what they've done the week before, what they're going to do the next morning. And I don't think this has happened, but you can do too much as a therapist the night before a game,
Hmm.
and whether it be flatten someone out. And the reality is because it's such a short window of time for a player to see a private individual, sometimes some individuals might get carried away and try to quote unquote do too much.
Hmm.
and it
Absolutely.
might be inappropriate. It might be inappropriate for the player. So, thankfully, I have been on both sides like yourself, and or you can understand the context of where they are at that, you know, moment of they're going to play this game. They just came off of a, let's say, a back to back. They are or they're not morning skating, and so you try to do, I don't want to say as little as necessary, but you try to do the appropriate amount that's still going to help them, but not going to put them in a position where either they can get hurt or not perform. So I will say that there might be some merit to some people getting defensive and territorial from the inside, because sometimes the people, depending on who it is, might not understand that context. Now, the guys who've been doing it for a long time, they'll understand that.
Hmm.
And you know, even with our team, you know, there are still some outside individuals that help them out, but these guys are with them in the summer. They understand their bodies, they understand the context, and thankfully, we as a staff on the inside are open enough to have those communications and with the private guys, and say, hey, listen, what's best for the individual, and come to some sort of beneficial recipe that will help them out and help us out.
Well, you said it there. You said communication. I think that's the key, right? I just remember
It absolutely is. Yeah.
for myself years ago when I'd reach out to private performance coaches in the off season, and I would get a little frustrated when they wouldn't return my call or return my text.
Sure.
And, I think it's needs to be that open communication needs to be present because, the days of players just following the program given to them by whoever the performance coach, whatever, those days are gone. You might have a handful of guys that are with you in person or doing your program by themselves. And I got to a point where like I would rather you go with this guy and be with them 5 days a week than taking my program and do it on your own at a at a gym. So I think that's a great topic, and yeah, I like your approach. That's really cool. Well,
Yeah.
I think we're gonna wrap it up here, bud. Anything else you'd like to share? Where can listeners find out more about you? I know you've written in the past and you do have a website, so can you share
Sure.
all that with us?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything I believe is under my name, whether it be jeffcubos.com or at Jeff Cubos. It's JEFFCUBOS. I would say if they want to learn about me, just shoot me a message. I'm pretty open. Often I'm delayed
Mhm.
just because of, a lot of things on the go. But I will get back to whoever reaches out if they reach out. I try to be open. If there's something on my mind, I try to write about it. Uh, you know, if it's on social media, you'll probably see images and videos of dogs and barbecues in my home gym, more than
Love it.
anything. But I do think the perspective more right now has evolved to being a life perspective than it is a professional perspective.
I love
So
that.
yeah,
That's awesome. And
yeah.
well, maybe
Yeah.
maybe we can do another seminar in Kelowna sometime. That was a fun time, right?
Oh, that was
Yeah.
a fun time. That was a
Yeah.
fun time. And hey, congrats to you and Will.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
That must be a blast right now.
it's pretty cool. It was kind of like it came full circle for me, like in a way,
Yeah,
like to
sure.
go back to the draft and see a lot of people that I worked under or worked with, and it's
Yeah,
pretty cool seeing players that I have coached become a lot of players who I've coached in the past become head coaches and um
sure.
player development guys, and seeing guys like Cogs played in the Oilers for a while. Seeing a guy
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that
yeah,
become a player development professional for Colorado, like that
yeah,
really makes me feel good because he was, a great person, great teammate, and worked his ass
Yeah.
off. So I love seeing stuff like that. And then obviously for my son, yeah, that was pretty cool. And you never know, he could be playing someday. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you have a couple new journeys going, with your son and
Yeah.
your gym and your business, the podcast, obviously. So,
Yeah. It's
kudos to you.
thanks. I was talking to Scotty Livingston recently and we were just
Yeah,
talking about, I'm doing things I want to do when I want to do
yeah,
them. And that's been a lot of fun.
sure,
So thanks for saying that. And
yeah,
yeah, Kelowna, that was a good time. We went to the Dairy Queen and Charlie was talking about sushi
yeah.
buffets and
Sushi buffets. Yeah,
that was a good trip. So I'll always remember that and a lot of
yeah.
fun
I
times.
miss those days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, Jeff, thanks for your
yeah.
time, bud. I know you're busy and I wish you all the best and we'll stay in touch.
Likewise,
All right.
absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, take
Okay,
care,
take
pal.
care. Yeah,
Yep,
absolutely.
bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.